Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Protect Native Money webinar. My name is Brian Howard. I'm with the National Congress of American Indians, and I will be your facilitator today with the slide presentation. And today we have Sherry Salway-Black with NCAI and Joanna Donahue with the Seven Sisters Community Development Group. And they will be your presenters today. Just to go over a little bit of the protocol for the webinar presentation. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can type them in the chat box, and it'll keep a log of the questions asked, and we will answer them at the end. If there are any unanswered questions, we will follow up with you via email or any other media device that you would like. And also at the end of the presentation, we will be answering questions from the phone line. So if you do have a question and would like to ask via phone, you can use the raise your hand option in the control panel of the webinar system. That'll signal me to unmute your line, and then you can ask your question. So I'll go ahead and pass it off to Sherry to begin.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this webinar on Native Financial Education Coalition update. As Brian mentioned, I will be speaking today, and also Joanna Donahue. I just wanted to mention a few words about Brian as well. Brian leads our stock market game that we do with Native youth, so he has a real interest in this area. For those of you coming to the meeting on the 26th, I'm sure he will be joining us. The slide you should have on your screen now is the presentation outline, so you can really see how we're going to move through this today. And I do think, we scheduled this for an hour, but I think that it really we may finish before that hour. And depending on your questions, we'll be happy to continue this for an hour. So I think we'll go to the next slide now. And we have the NFEC update, and again, we've talked to, we've welcomed people, we've done the webinar tips, we've done introductions. The purpose of this webinar is really to provide updates on the Protect Native Money campaign and the Native Financial Education Coalition, and to also solicit input and feedback on NFEC topics. So, and we shared in one of the updates, I think in December, early January, that we would try to do webinars or conference calls on a regular basis. While they may not be monthly, I feel they may be at a minimum quarterly. So we could go to the next slide there. Thank you. Okay, so on your screen you should be seeing a slide called Accomplishments, and I wanted to again, part of what you'll learn in this webinar is that we're going to be having a small working group session February 26th. And we wanted to schedule this webinar enough in advance for people who are not able to attend in person, and perhaps you'll be able to give us your input about some of the things to talk about and discuss, or the things that you're concerned with at that time. So just to give you a little bit of some background on some of the accomplishments, we really started this effort last summer. And I won't really go through a lot because I've been providing folks with updates, written updates, and they're on our website. When we realized that the Cobell settlement, Keep Seagull, and dozens of tribal trust cases were all coming down at the same time, so we brought together in 2 meetings over the summer groups from tribes, from Native nonprofits, and from government offices to really help us think about what could be done and what could be done quickly. And through that was launched the Protect Native Money campaign. And we, one of the first things we did was working with the FBC and FTC and the CFPB, developed an alert that went out in the Keep Seagull checks for Native farmers and ranchers. And then we really focused a lot on the Cobell settlement, and we also were able to do some training from one of the tribes that had just received some tribal trust funds working with, again, some folks from different organizations, different government agencies. We would develop some resources that were put up on our webpage at Protect Native Money under the NCAI webpage, and really tried to look at doing outreach about this over the holidays. We, as soon as we knew when the Cobell checks were, the first Cobell checks were coming out, we did a PSA with our president, Jefferson Keel. Sorry about that. I have a siren going by. So we did a PSA just to alert people on the consumer protection aspects, and this was played. We had support from Native public media and the Native radio stations to really get this out into Indian country. And then with NFEC, we did a meeting in September, early September in Denver, where, again, we were trying to really move NFEC forward and doing some outreach. We also did a session at our conference. And that really hasn't moved a great deal. A lot of it has been, you know, based on my availability and losing some staff right around that time. But we really want to, again, move this piece forward. And so one of the areas for sure is the, you know, looking at April coming up with the Financial Education Month. Next slide. So just again, I've given you, you know, some updates, and again, I don't want to repeat what I've included in the written updates that I've given to you. But let me just, some key things coming up with Cobell. You all know that the Stage 1 checks for the Historical Accounting Group have gone out in December, and then many out in January as people updated their information, their whereabouts unknown became known, and people were found. So the Stage 2 checks will be coming out probably in the fall, but there's an important deadline coming up, which is March 1. And in the update email today that you received, you have an attachment that explains a little bit more about that. So we just hope that you can get this information out to your networks, and that we're going to be, we've done one broadcast alert on this already. We've updated, we have monthly conference calls with our board of directors and all of the regional intertribals, and it was provided there. And so we just want to make sure that folks are aware of this. We have had some issues come up, and again, this is something I want to encourage people to let us know about, that if you are aware of things that have prevented people or that have been barriers to people cashing their checks, or consumer frauds, that they're things that are just kind of, you know, hinky, I would please let us know. We just received something this week from Tanya Fiddler, from other people, about a lot of folks getting something that looks like a W-2, some very formal government documents, but it's really a marketing scam, and the fact that it's coming out around all of these settlements. And so we forwarded that to the CFPB to really take a look at it. So we also, Jackie Johnson-Payton and I have met with the Special Master, Richard Levy. His role is going to be to mitigate any claims as people are denied, you know, becoming a member of the Cobell class. He's there to really address those and to help speed the process. It'll be past the March 1 deadline, but he's also going to be a presenter at our Executive Council winter session the week of March 4th. So anyway, so just a little bit of the key updates on that. The Keep Segal settlement, again, I sent to you on the last two emails the updated information about the tax webinar and the clinics. And I would check that wsu.edu website for additional information about that. And the woman's name is Joanne Warner, and she's very helpful. But she did share with me the Train the Trainer for the tax folks is February 19th. So just really, you know, forward that out to your networks as well. So I also wanted to give an update on the President's Advisory Council on Financial Capability, and folks may know that I've been honored to be a member of that council. Well, it's now come to an end. It was a 2-year council. I was able to spend only 1 year. on it once I got my nomination. The executive order that launched it had a sunset, which was January of 2013. And I've been in conversations with the folks who manage it at Treasury, and it's not going to be, that we think, or at this point, reinstituted, at least the way that it was. But it may move forward with a new focus. And folks may know that we had 3 theme areas that were youth education and financial education, education through the workplace, and education in your families and communities. And the sense was that it was quite a broad agenda, and that if we were to go forward with the next council, that it would very much focus in on youth. And so one of the things they've asked me and asked other members of it is they really want to have practitioners on this council, people who are actually working on these things in the field, in addition to others as well. So I would be interested in if folks want to make some recommendations to me via email of people who could serve on this council, who are practitioners. And again, it's not a paid position, nor is your travel compensated, so that's something to know ahead of time. But we really do want to have some additional Native people, and I do not know if I will be continuing on the council. So that's just an update on that, and I can talk a little bit more about that if there are any questions. Other appointments and announcements. We want to also announce that Tanya Fiddler has been appointed on the CDFI board, advisory board, which is fabulous. Let me do. So I think, Joanna, I'm going to go ahead and turn that over to you to continue forward.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Sherry. And thanks to everyone for joining the call today. As Sherry said, my name is Joanna Donahoe, and I'm a partner with the Seven Sisters Community Development Group. And NCAI has asked us to help to facilitate and move forward the work with the NFEC. As some of you guys on the line may know, in various capacities, I've worked with the NFEC since its outset, when Sherry first started this back in 2001, I guess, 2001. So really excited to be helping to NCAI to move this forward. And as Sherry mentioned at the beginning of this call, what's coming up right away is on February 26th, a small planning meeting that'll happen at the embassy with, it'll be a full-day meeting with folks who are able to participate and are interested in kind of taking rolling up their sleeves and putting some more thought into how to structure the NFEC moving forward. Our objectives for the day will be to really determine our priorities, determine the NFEC's priorities, to look at the structure and the governance and the working committees and figure out what makes the most sense to advance this work, and then to also look at how we might commemorate Financial Literacy Month in April. Obviously, we can pick up, and we'll talk about this at the end of the call, we can pick up where things left off, but we wanted to get fresh ideas. We wanted to get input and kind of think. A lot has changed since 2009 when this work stopped, and so we want to be sure that we're addressing what Indian country is facing today. So the other piece to this is that in preparation for the meeting on the 26th, we put together a short survey for members of this listserv to complete, and it will be released tomorrow to everyone who is on Sherry's mailing list. And I believe, Sherry, you said you're around 400 people now, or is it higher than that?
No, about 400.
About 400 people. And of course, we are always happy to grow that. So what we're hoping is that when you receive your link, you complete the survey, which you should receive in your email tomorrow. But also, if you can forward that link to others in your network so that we can get as broad of input, especially from practitioners in Indian country who are doing this work, as well as other stakeholders, so we can get their input to fold into this planning meeting. It's a short survey. It should only take you about 10 or so minutes to complete. We're going to ask you some tough questions about how ranking priorities, and there's plenty of other opportunities within the survey to add additional thoughts in case the choices that are presented are what you're, if you think something's missing, you can definitely add in the other fields. So that survey, I think, will be a great way to make sure we're hearing from folks and moving forward in the direction that folks want to go. So if we can move to the next slide. We want to go ahead and take the time that we have on the phone today to begin to get your input on some of the areas that will be addressed in the survey, but just in two areas, kind of the working committee topics, as well as what we'll do in April. We want to definitely get as much input as we can on these areas. So we thought we'd start now just with the folks that are on the phone and let you know what the committees were and get your feedback on what they should be now. So where we left off in 2009, we had 5 committees with NFEC. The training committee, this committee focused on making practitioners in Indian country aware of instructor training opportunities for financial education curricula, both community-based as well as in schools and other opportunities, Native-focused curricula as well as others that are out there that help to build capacity. We did, at some point, some of the members of NFEC in this committee actually organized new trainings under kind of the auspices of NFEC, but in most cases it was making sure people were aware of them and encouraging people to expand their audiences to Native instructors so that we could build the capacity of instructors in Indian country. So that was the training committee. The second was the Tribal Colleges and Universities Initiative. There were, over the years, a number of, and still now today, a number of tribal colleges and universities who have spent a lot of resources and focused on not only providing financial education to their students, but also to their communities at large. And some of them are continuing to do this work and have spun off other entities like community development financial institutions. And so tribal colleges were a particularly active sector in this work, and so we had and a lot of similarities, obviously, into the way they operate. So there was a committee dedicated to furthering the work of TCUs. The third area we focused was youth, and that was because so many of the members of NFEC felt like by the time that adults are starting to build a house or buy a house and learn about some, and look at their credit, and it was almost too late, and so many folks encouraged starting at the youth level. So obviously that was a priority, and there was a whole committee dedicated to looking at opportunities to expand financial education among Native youth, partnering with the NIEA and other entities. Another committee that came about a little bit later was the Earned Income Tax Credit Committee, and this was because, as you all know, and this is very similar to what's happening now with all of the legal settlements where windfalls are coming, that tax time is a time in many cases where it's a teachable moment because of the windfalls, and people are really calling on financial management skills to figure out what to do with this money. So that is an area that was very active, not only in promoting the Earned Income Tax Credit so people were aware of it, but also in making people aware of free tax preparation services that existed in their areas and prompting the creation of new volunteer income tax assistance VITA sites for free tax preparation. So that was a very active. Finally, the last committee was the New Assets Committee, and this was to address the requests from many of the members who are working with community members who obtain new assets either through distributions or through per capita, and kind of looking at the unique needs there in those tribal communities where there were payments coming down the pike where there was a need, especially with the youth and the 18 money, for looking at ways to provide financial education that's relevant in that situation. So let me stop there. Those were the committees. As I said before, the landscape is much different now. I want to perhaps get some input from folks on the phone about whether any of these committees should stay or if there are other areas that you think that NFEC should focus on. And just to let you know, the NFEC committees, the working committees, had volunteer chairs. In some cases where we did have funding, we were able to hire a consultant to do a little more of the organizational work where there was funding behind a particular area, and we tried to do that because that often helped to make the committee move forward. But in general, we always had volunteers who served as the chairs, with or without a consultant, and who organized periodic meetings, mainly over conference calls. In some cases, groups met in person at conferences where a large group would happen to be for another reason, like, for example, the EITC committee would get together at the National Community Tax Coalition meetings and things like that. And when the TCUs got together, they often had meetings there. And they actually did organize some of their own trainings and were very active. So that's what the committee structure has been like in the past. So I'd just like to open the floor and get people's thoughts on topics for the future going forward. And you can let Brian know that you'd like to share some feedback by raising your hand and he'll unmute you, or you can feel free to type in the chat box on your screen. Just if you want to throw out some thoughts, you can just type right in.
I do see one individual that has their hand raised, Christian Lind. I will go ahead and unmute your line. Christian, did you have a question? Okay, so we will go ahead and proceed with the webinar.
Okay, so nothing from her?
No, there's no questions right now.
Okay, great. So, all right, so I would encourage you to, any feedback that you have, you can definitely respond when you do the survey that you'll receive tomorrow, or you can feel free to email me or Sherry with any ideas or thoughts you have on committee topics.
And actually, we do have a question that was sent to our questions box.
Okay.
There's a question that says, what working committees will the NFEC continue to work with?
Well, that's what we're trying to get feedback about today, because we want to make sure that the committees are relevant. I mean, if I had to guess today, I definitely think that youth would still be on the list, especially given the council's focus going forward. But I guess I would turn the question around to say, well, what topics do you think should be addressed going forward? And it may be that people agree that these 5 that are on the screen now are what they should, those should be the focus. But before assuming that, we wanted to make sure and see if there are other areas that people feel that there's a particular need in. For example, consumer protection is an area that's become more discussed and more talked about given the creation of the Consumer Protection Financial Bureau. But we wanted to see what you guys thought. So I'm going to turn that question over back to the person who asked it, to ask it back to them.
Okay, there's no other questions at this time, so we'll go ahead and proceed. Okay,
great. So if you want to go to the next slide, Brian, we'll move to the next question for our discussion point for the group. So Financial Literacy Month it has been designated by whoever designates these types of months. I believe it's Congress, designates that April will be the month when groups focus on financial literacy. And in the past, the Native Financial Education Coalition commemorated Financial Literacy Month by organizing a national policy briefing in Washington, D.C. For, I think maybe there were 5 consecutive briefings starting in 2004. And they were held at various places, either on Capitol Hill or a couple times at the office of the Mashantucket Pequot tribe nation at their Washington office. And that was accompanied by Hill visits. And folks from NFEC came to Washington, and we had various guest speakers and issued policy recommendations and really focused on policy, but also information sharing and raising awareness about the financial education needs in Indian country with partners in Washington, including policymakers, federal agencies, but also national intermediaries who work in Indian country, because they all have a role to play. So the idea there was to look at how to promote financial education opportunities through all the different partners in DC. And so, as Sherry mentioned, we would like to continue to do something in April to recognize Financial Literacy Month, and we wanted to see what ideas folks had, either to do a national event or to perhaps promote activities at the local level. Congress this is a different year for Congress because of everything that's going on financially, and so it may or may not make sense to do things on the policy level. We thought about promoting some activities on the local level, having a type of tribal leaders toolkit, so to speak, kind of using the Native Vote model, where we would launch something that wouldn't just be during the month of April, but perhaps looking at how to provide resources for tribal leaders to do awareness campaigns in their communities. So April might be a month to kind of launch something, to host a meeting. So we wanted to get your feedback on perhaps what that might look like, and whether it's something that your organization might want to be involved with, or in general just has ideas about. So feel free to type something in the chat box or to raise your hand, and we can unmute you if you have thoughts on any of these topics.
Yeah, and just as follow-up to the previous question asked about the committees, Lynn Harrelson said that there should be some committees focused on youth, tribal colleges and universities, consumer protection, tax time more broadly than EITC. And then we also had a question regarding what type of additional education has been or will be added to the youth initiative?
Well, I think that depends on the committee. I know that recently there have been some new materials released by the FDIC. The Money Smart curriculum is now, there is a version particularly for youth, for elementary school age children, and I know that some communities have developed their own, some Native communities have developed their own youth curricula. So we definitely would serve as a clearinghouse for those materials that are available to target youth. As I mentioned earlier, we did work with the National Indian Education Association in the past, and would want to continue to do that, to look, to the extent that they're interested, to look for opportunities to train teachers in various materials that are available to implement in schools serving Native kids. So, what the committee does is really up to the committee. I mean, obviously we'll provide guidance, and in the past we've partnered with Jumpstart Coalition, which is a national coalition of all different types of stakeholders, lenders, schools, financial education providers, who are all interested in promoting Indian country, and they've been very open to partnering on Native issues as well. So there's a lot out there that can happen. It just depends on how active the committees want to be. We had the Federal Reserve was also very interested in this area in the past, so we'd hope to have their continued involvement. So Brian, do you have other areas or other questions or comments?
I do. We have a couple of statements and a question from Janie Hitt.
Okay.
And I've already unmuted your line, Janie, so go ahead.
Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me now?
I can hear you, Janie.
Okay, great. I made a comment in the little chat box. This may be a committee of one, but we're very happy here at our institution at the University of Arkansas School of Law. We have a new initiative that we've launched, Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative. And we would be very happy to host a committee that would work in the area of farm and ranch and food financial issues, because they tend to be very specialized if you are actively engaged or trying to be engaged in anything that's food related. So much so that the IRS even has a separate publication just for farm and ranch tax, and it can be pretty gnarly and kind of complicated. And we would love to be engaged in this as an outgrowth of the Keep Siegel settlement and just staying kind of focused on these issues, anything we could do to help. We also have some friends in the larger agricultural community that have been reaching out into Indian country to support our Native youth who are involved in organizations such as FFA, and a lot of those organizations have financial literacy curriculums that are embedded in their own work. So it might be a good avenue if anyone else is interested in that kind of a committee for us to do that and reach out to some other players who can help our youth who are involved and our adults who are involved in this particular segment of commercial enterprises.
That's great, Janie. That's a great idea. I know that First Nations is actually having a conference this spring on these very issues for Native communities. And another new development since NFEC had those committees was the Healthy Foods Financing Initiative at the Treasury CDFI Fund. So it's obviously a very hot topic, and of course the First Lady's involvement in this area has really prompted a lot of attention. But which is great. It's been an active issue in Indian country for many years. So that's a great idea. I think there would be a lot of interest from others to join you on that committee. So you wouldn't just be one.
Oh, good. Well, and we would immediately reach out to First Nations and IEC, and there's several other groups that are just kind of that could fold into that really well, I think. So we'd be glad to help, be a committee chair, do whatever we need to do to keep that piece of it moving.
Okay, awesome, great. And you're back at your university now, or
yes, I'm in Arkansas with Stacy Leeds, who, as you know, is on the Trust Reform Commission. So she's the dean of the law school here and enticed me to come back home. So I'll be working on these issues from home, from this area of the country, but we're going to have a national focus.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Janie. We also have a question from Sean Spruce. This question was related to what's going on at the national level for Financial Literacy Month.
Well, Sean, that's what we're talking about. At the we're trying to figure out is what should Indian country do? What should the Native Financial Education Coalition do in this area? Now, the Jumpstart Coalition is, as they have for the past, I don't know, 8 or so years, they have a special dinner in D.C. of their members to recognize outstanding performances among the Jumpstart coalitions and their member organizations, which are pretty broad, the types of folks who are part of Jumpstart. But they're also doing a Hill Day where they invite financial education providers, and I think they have probably, I don't know, about 40 to 60 different providers that set up tables with information about their financial education materials in D.C., and their audience are Hill staff and members of Congress and policymakers in D.C., federal agencies, to help raise awareness and share information about what's out there. So in the past, we've often piggybacked on that event to make sure that the Native issues are front and center as well. But I would ask if others know of other events. I know that the Federal Reserve often has coordinated Money Smart Weeks in different parts of the country. Not something in D.C., but some different events in different places. It depends on if there's someone who's actively promoting it in that particular region. So we can definitely plug into some of those efforts as well. I don't know, did Sean want to add anything to that? Do we want to unmute Sean for a sec?
Yeah, Sean, I'm not able to see you're connected to the phone on the control panel. So I apologize, but I can't unmute you because there's no icon there. But if you have any additional questions, you can type them to me, and I can relay them as well.
I can also offer some things too while Sean is doing that. One of the areas with the President's Advisory Council and whatever comes up next is they do also want to know exciting, innovative efforts that are going on in the country related to youth financial capability building. And so it'd be very good to know there's potential to have, I'd love to have something from Indian country highlighted in April from the perspective of the White House and the President's Advisory Council. So that is also something that is going on as well. And again, I'll learn more as we get closer to April. Unfortunately, I can imagine that there are a number of organizations who were represented on the council who would be doing things. For example, Operation Hope, one of the areas that they focused on in the work that they do is to get mayors of big cities to, or cities, period. It started out big cities and then it expanded, to agree to set up a local financial capability council. So there was a push to do more than 100 of those, and he met that and expanded beyond that. So there are, I think we'll be learning about more and more of what's happening nationally, probably in the next few weeks. And there's some things, maybe we can do some research to also find that out.
And since Sean is unable to talk over the phone, he did leave a comment saying that we should do our own financial capability challenge exam since Treasury is not offering it this year.
Okay.
And we also have another comment from Lynn Harrelson. It's a comment and a question. Could we look at current service provision points to train frontline workers to provide basic financial coaching? Our Office of Empowerment is putting together a toolkit for social workers that could be adapted.
Great. Yes, financial coaching, that's definitely a new trend as well, something that's become increasingly more popular in the past 5 years just in terms of the financial education trend. So coaching may be another area that we want to kind of focus on. I don't know if it would be its own standalone committee, but we would definitely want to talk with you more, Lynn, about how we can identify service points for Indian country to plug into that coaching tool. And did Lynn want to say anything? Did you want to unmute her? Are you able to?
Yeah, give me 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, Lynn, your line is unmuted in case you wanted to make any further statements.
Yeah, we just have that resource that's coming out, and I thought it could be adapted. We spoke earlier this week with the Navajo Nation, and they are looking for ways to build. Really, it's a consumer protection issue. They have some consumer protection issues, as well as they feel like financial literacy and knowing their rights is important. But that same conversation has come up. What are those intersection points, what are the trusted sources that we can go through with resources or training or education or webinars or whatever to reach the population, especially coming, from Washington. What resources can we provide people on the ground, such as the toolkit that can allow them, if they're helping them file EITC or get some kind of benefit, can they also be talking to them about managing resources, things like that, just a quick conversation. So, and that's where we struggle from our position is, we can provide a whole bunch of materials as well as all the other agencies can, but how do those get on the ground? How do they get deployed? Do people on the ground need to be trained? So we are, as CFBB, are struggling with that.
Okay, great, Lynn. That's helpful. Thank you. And I'm sure if similar to, there are other federal agencies, I'm sure, that are struggling with the same thing, as well as other providers and lenders even. So it may be that we want to look at either a committee or some task under NFEC that helps to kind of link the channel of resources with the end users, more of a clearinghouse function. Not to duplicate what else is already out there, but to kind of build on it. Great. Okay, Brian, anything else in the queue?
I'm not seeing anything else. If anyone else has a question, like I said, you can type it in the questions box, and I can read your question. And also, if you want to ask a question over the phone, you can type in the box just letting me know, or you can signal me by using the raise the hand option.
Okay. Thanks, Brian. We've had some great suggestions, adding the healthy foods, adding consumer protection, broadening the EITC topic to be, a broader tax time, looking at, for April, kind of focusing on use, looking at a financial capability exam because Treasury is not doing it this year, looking at the current clearinghouse function that Len just described. So really great feedback. Thank you, guys. And if there aren't any other kind of other ideas or questions or comments that you want to share, Brian, we can move to the next slide on next steps. Although, I will share I'll share one thing. I'm not sure if Marvin Ginn's on the line, but Marvin Ginn's from New Mexico. He's with Native Community Finance, a Native CDFI serving Native population in New Mexico. He just received a grant from the Investor Protection Trust to do investor protection and financial education, especially targeting recipients of of Keep Siegel and the other settlements that went to tribes in New Mexico. And what's exciting about that, it's a small program for New Mexico. He'll be partnering with the New Mexico Department of Indian Affairs, as well as the hopefully the All Indian Pueblo Council, the tribal leadership there. But what's exciting about that is that it's the Investor Protection Trust is very interested in broadening and replicating that initiative to other states where there's high Native populations and interest in doing the same type of work. So just throw that out there as another new development. And as far as next steps, really the first thing is to complete your survey. And hopefully today's discussion was able to give you some food for thought and kind of get your creative juices flowing, so when you complete the survey, you can think through other ideas or what might make sense in your responses to the survey questions. Again, it's very short, but you can spend more time typing in ideas into the other sections in each of the questions. So I really encourage you to do that. It'll be mailed out tomorrow morning, so take a look, and you'll have until next week, next Thursday, February 21st. It'll be open until then, so you have a whole week to provide your feedback. but we also encourage you to help spread the word. Feel free to send that to your networks. Many of the folks who participated in the Denver meeting last fall, that's what they had committed to do, to help spread the word through their network. So feel free to do that. And at the end of the survey, there's a place where if you're not already on Sherry's mailing list, you can enter in your email address so that you will be added to the mailing list. So when you send it on, just let folks know, when you send on the survey link, let folks know that if this is an area that they're interested in continuing to work in, or at least stay informed about, they can enter their email address at the end. We don't have a formal infrastructure yet for this email listserv, but I have a feeling that'll be coming down the road as well. But this will give them a way to sign up. Of course, you can always email Sherry, who's been so gracious to kind of keep the information flowing. The next webinar for NFEC is scheduled for March 13th at 3 p.m. Eastern. So definitely please mark your calendar. And at this webinar, we will present the results from the survey as well as the results from the February 26th planning meeting. So you'll get a feel for kind of the direction we're heading towards. And leading up until the February 26th meeting, of course, we welcome feedback through the survey or other means. And then on March 13th, we'll reconvene to present information about what was decided and where we're headed, and really focus on what's happening in April. To the extent that information about the April activities are available before then, we'll certainly convey that to you. But we wanted to go ahead and schedule another call so you could have it on your calendar and have a plan to plug in to hear next steps. So Brian, unless you have anything else, I'll turn it back to Sherry.
Yeah, I do have another question from Thelma Pillay. I'm going to try and unmute your line. We're kind of having some technical difficulties here, but Thelma, are you there?
I'm not hearing Thelma.
Okay. So she did type a question in, but unfortunately there's an issue with our conference line right now. But her question was, are there any plans to present the educational opportunities at major tribal events that will be held this year based upon tribal regional meetings or conferences?
That's a great suggestion, and definitely something that will be part of the work of NFEC. Each of the topic areas, obviously there are different national Native conferences that focus on that area. For example, as I mentioned, NIEA for youth, the National American Indian Housing Council for housing issues, and I believe Thelma works at HUD. If I'm not mistaken, I think she's at HUD. But yes, that's exactly the part of, in the past, has been a priority of NFEC, is to look for ways to not only get financial education providers, non-Native financial education providers, to expand their target market to include Indian country, but also to encourage other types of providers within Indian country to include financial education within their work. And that's kind of what Lynn had alluded to, where if you're providing social services, it's a good teachable moment for folks to hear about, to have some financial coaching. So definitely looking at ways to cross-market within other Native service providers to bring financial education into the mix through labor-funded entities, workforce development, through housing, through tax time, through social services, even domestic violence providers, prevention providers. The sky's the limit. Financial education has a role to play in all of the above. So we'll definitely be looking at that, and again, that might be an area for focus for some of the committees, and we'll look to you all, the members of the committee, to help direct us to where the right places are so that we can get the word out.
Okay, I think Brian tells me there are no additional questions that we're seeing at this point, and I wanted to close this out. I am surprised we did go the full hour. It's great and good participation and interest from folks. I wanted to just close with a few points about the working group meeting coming up, and I will be sending out something to the whole group before tomorrow morning. I wanted to share about the survey with this group, but we'll be going out to alert everyone that they'll be getting this survey. But I also wanted to, some of you are on the phone, we're at the September 6th meeting. We will be building on the work that was done at that meeting. I just wanted to assure folks that it was great work, and it's providing a base and a jumping off point for us to continue moving the NFEC forward. So we do currently have about 20-some people who have responded for the February 26th meeting. If you're still interested or know of folks who want to attend, it will be here at the embassy. And again, I'll be getting out additional information and a reminder to people about that. So on that note, I'll check one more time with Brian to see if we have anything. And I think folks are winding down here. Thank you very much. And again, as Joanna, thank you so much for all of your good information. And we will be doing, again, a follow-up webinar on March 13th. So thank you all, and we look forward to either seeing you on the 26th or talking again in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Sherry.
Bye.